Welcome to the Your Love Ministry podcast with Pam Baggott and me, Brenda Poarch. There are many admirable women in the Bible, but there are a couple of really evil ones too. And one of them is so bad that her name sometimes is used as a noun to describe women. Somebody might say something like, she's a real Jezebel. I've never known anyone who named their child Jezebel. Her story is found in 1st and 2nd Kings, and her life began as a princess. That might have been a problem to begin with. Uh,
It didn't
that
evidently help.
it
Okay.
didn't help. The country that she was from was devoted to the worship of a false god named Baal, and Jezebel was a very religious person. She married a man who was very evil, and it seemed like a natural fit. I guess evil attracted evil. And
Mhm.
Ahab was the king of Israel. And so, Pam, we know a little bit, we just told a little bit about Jezebel, but what does the Bible tell us about Ahab?
Well, in 1 Kings 16, verses 30 to 33, we get this. Now, Ahab, the son of Omri, did evil in the sight of the Lord, more than all who were before him. And it came to pass, as though it had been a trivial thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, that he took his wife, Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians. And he went and served Baal and worshipped him. Then he set up an altar for Baal in the temple of Baal, which he had built in Samaria. And Ahab made a wooden image. Ahab did more to provoke the Lord God of Israel to anger than all the kings of Israel who were before him. Now, that first and last sentence impressed me. There are a lot of bad kings of Israel. So this tells us so much about Ahab. He did more to provoke the Lord God of Israel to anger than all the kings of Israel before him. That was an accomplishment.
Yeah, because
And
there were some
Ahab
bad kings.
and Ahab and Jezebel teamed up. So that's like a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Um, what can you tell us about the area that they're from? You said that he was from Sidon.
Yes.
Okay, what can
Um,
you tell us about that? You're good with geography and all that good stuff.
I just do research.
Okay.
Sidon was in the area that we call Lebanon now. It was one of the oldest cities in the world. It was supposed to be 5 or 6 thousand years old.
Wow.
Um, but it was in a very important trade location on the Mediterranean coast. Its culture was Phoenician, and at the time of Jezebel, they referred to their false god as Baal or Bel.
Hmm. Now, I don't think I ever really thought about Jezebel being the daughter of a king. And so we talked about that just a second ago. She was probably used to being pampered and having her way from the very beginning.
Hmm.
And then she marries a king, which gives her even more power.
Right.
And instead of Ahab saying, no, we're going to worship the one true God, little wife says, we're going to worship our God. And Ahab goes right along with her and joins her in worshiping Baal. Now, Baal is an interesting God to me, and you and I have talked, and I've learned a little bit, but I'd like you to share with our audience a little bit more about this false God named Baal, because it's kind of something.
Well, Baal was worshipped by more than one of the countries that were neighbors to Israel, and he was sometimes referred to as Baals, meaning more than one god. Baal was known as a storm god, and he was also a god of fertility and weather, especially rain.
Hmm.
The symbol of this false god was the bull. And Baal is also sometimes associated with Asherah, who was a false goddess. Followers of Baal had really disturbing ways of worshiping, which included human sacrifices.
Oh,
Yeah. Jezebel and Ahab not only forced their people to worship Baal, they persecuted those who continued to serve the true God.
oh, man. I can't even imagine that. Going from worshiping a true and loving God to being forced to worship a false God that was into people killing each other. And that just, and then I can't even go there because it just, I can't wrap my mind around a God that would want people to kill each other. I don't know. I know God sent his people in to take over lands and all that. So there was that, but this was kind of a whole nother thing is I want you to worship me by sacrificing people. Let's move on before I have a nervous breakdown.
You're getting caught in there, aren't you?
Unless you had something you wanted to say.
We can go on. You need to get out of this anyway.
Just gives me the creeps.
I can
All right.
tell.
So 1 Kings 18 says, and it came to pass after many days that the word of the Lord came to Elijah in the 3rd year, saying, oh, wait, I've skipped something.
You did. You skipped
I
a section
did.
of it.
Okay. So in 1 Kings 18, God sends his prophet Elijah to Ahab. Now, if you know anything about the Bible, I'm sure you've heard of Elijah. He was a very devout, powerful, loving, obedient prophet for God. And so he is sending poor Elijah to Ahab. And the last time that God sent Elijah to Ahab, it was to tell him that there'd be a drought in the nation for 3 years. Now, when we talk about droughts, we're not just talking about, like, it hasn't rained here for a couple of weeks in Florida. My grass is starting to die. It's getting a little crunchy. But Walmart still has lots of food.
Yes.
And for those people, drought, especially for that long a period of time, meant literal starvation. It was a big deal. And so the last time he went, he was there to give him this terrible news. And so Ahab had been looking for Elijah ever since the drought started. And God had been hiding and protecting Elijah from Ahab. And so let's read now and start with verse 1 of Kings 18. And it came to pass after many days that the word of the Lord came to Elijah in the 3rd year, saying, go present yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain on the earth. So Elijah went to present himself to Ahab, and there was a severe famine in Samaria. And Ahab had called Obadiah, who was in charge of his house. Now Obadiah feared the Lord greatly, for it was while Jezebel massacred the prophets of the Lord that Obadiah had taken 100 prophets and hidden them, 50 to a cave, and had fed them with bread and water. So these men have been hiding in a cave, eating bread and water for 3 years. Right? Am I reading that correctly? Is that what you get out of it?
It seems like it. It had to be a long time, whether it was the full 3 years or not. She was looking for him. She wanted to get rid of him.
Well, that's true. Maybe right at first the famine wasn't bad, but she was looking for him. Now I find it interesting that it says that Jezebel massacred the prophets, not Ahab, because we're talking about Jezebel here today. Ahab had his part to play, and God will take care of Ahab. But right now we're talking about Jezebel.
You almost said it.
Yeah, I almost did. But this was such a bloody, sad time for the people to be forced to worship a God that wants you to sacrifice. Now to have all of your prophets massacred. I mean, that is not a light word. She
No.
massacred them. And how brave of Obadiah it was to hide these men. And I just can't imagine how the men would feel knowing that if they're found out, what's going to happen to them. And they lived on bread and water. This was a terrible time for all of God's people because of these wicked rulers, especially good old Jezebel.
Yeah. I like to call her Jessie. It's okay.
I almost said it.
Yeah, I'm corrupting you, I know.
Yes, you are.
Well, at this time, Ahab and Obadiah, the one who had saved the prophets, were leading separate searches. Obadiah was in charge of Ahab's house. He worked for him.
Mhm.
So he sent him out. They were both looking for grass to feed the livestock because the other thing about a drought, you can't depend on eating animals because the animals are going to die too. So they needed some grass. So here's what happened in 1 Kings 18, 7-15. Now, as Obadiah was on his way, suddenly Elijah met him, and he recognized him and fell on his face and said, is that you, my lord Elijah? And he answered him, it is I. Go tell your master Elijah is here. So he said, how have I sinned that you're delivering your servant into the hand of Ahab to kill me? As the Lord your God lives, there's no nation or kingdom where my master has not sent someone to hunt for you. And when they said he is not here, he took an oath from the kingdom or nation that they could not find you. And now you say, go tell your master Elijah is here. And it'll come to pass as soon as I'm gone from you that the Spirit of the Lord will carry you to a place I do not know. So when I go and tell Ahab and he cannot find you, he will kill me. But I, your servant, have feared the Lord from my youth. Was it not reported to my Lord what I did when Jezebel killed the prophets of the Lord? How I hid 100 men of the Lord's prophets, 50 to a cave, and fed them with bread and water? And now you say, go tell your master Elijah is here. He will kill me. Well, then Elijah said, as the Lord of hosts lives, before whom I stand, I will surely present myself to him today. Poor Obadiah. It's bad enough that his boss is a king whose wife kills those who serve God, and
Mhm.
Obadiah has to hide his belief in God. And now he's being put in a dangerous position by God's prophet. If he gives Ahab this message and then God carries Elijah away as he did before, Ahab is going to take his anger out on Obadiah, and I wouldn't blame him if he whined a little at this point.
I would be whining too. Because basically Obadiah saying, now wait a minute. The last time we went through this,
Yeah,
you disappeared
mm,
and nobody's been able to find you for 3 years. And if you disappear again, I'm toast.
exactly.
They're going to kill me. And the bad thing is, Obadiah is not just, he's not just protecting his own life, but he's feeding 100 men.
Hmm.
And so, maybe he has help, we don't know, but uh, that's a big ask. It's a big
Hmm.
ask to go and tell him that he's coming. But Obadiah did do just as Elijah asked, and Elijah did keep his promise. And that day, Elijah faced 450 prophets of Baal who ate at Jezebel's table in front of all the people of the country. God demonstrated that he is the true God and that Baal wasn't real. And the result of that long day was all the people declared their belief in God, and the prophets of Baal was killed. And I just have to say, ladies, if you haven't read that story, if you haven't heard that story, you need to. And I think, have we done a podcast on that one? I want
I
to
don't
say
think
we
we did
have.
yet.
I'm
I
not
don't know.
sure.
I've taught it a few times recently, but I can't remember us doing the
We'll
podcast.
have to look that up because that one is a fun thing to do, especially when Elijah starts making fun of them.
Oh, I love that. I
I
love
love
that.
that part. Yes. So the the so that Elijah he shows up. He does what he says. He goes to the king, and there's this big battle, and now all the Baal prophets are killed. So that should be the end of the story, right? They've lost all the power, all the prophets are gone, and the
Yeah.
story lived happily ever after, right?
Those priests were Jezebel's pets, and
Mhm.
Baal was her religion, which she was passionate about, so passionate that she'd killed those who served another god. Her priests have now been executed, and the people have turned back to God completely. So, how do you think Jezzy's going to react to all this?
I love it that you call her Jessie, because that's kind of disrespectful, and that's what she deserves.
What I think too. Yes.
But, I can just picture in my mind, those Disney movies where they show the Wicked Witch and she doesn't get her way and she pitches a fit, or whatever. I can just picture in my mind what this woman who grew up as a princess and is now a queen and is used to having her way and has such an evil heart, how she must have felt when they got the news that the all of the prophets, all of her prophets are dead. Now it's starting to rain, and here's King Ahab. He's got to go home soaking wet to tell the little woman at home, well, the battle on the mountain didn't exactly go like you thought it would go.
Mhm.
So now let's see what happens when hubby gets home with the news. And we see that in 1 Kings 19, verses 1 through 3. And Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done, also how he had executed all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah saying, so let the gods do to me, and more also, if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by tomorrow about this time. And when he saw that, he arose and ran for his life and went to Beersheba, which belonged to Judah, and left his servant there. So she has made a vow. She is saying, within 24 hours, may the gods do to me what you've done if I don't do to you what you did to them. In other words, if you're not dead in 24 hours, I'm praying that the gods take me. That's how
Mhm.
I'm reading it. Is that what you get out of it, Pam?
It is kind of the kind of threat. She didn't die in 24 hours. There's a lot more story, but
No, she
Yeah,
did not. 24 hours.
she's in a mood. She's having a little tantrum.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is. And I don't blame Elijah for getting out of Dodge, for leaving town.
I agree.
She's a murderer. She's got a proven track of murdering people, and her husband is just as bad. And the next few chapters talk about the battles and the sins of Ahab. Now, God still worked with Ahab as a king, but Ahab's sinful ways continued, and a prophet of God warned Ahab, because you're not following what God says, the way God says to do it, there will be consequences for you too. So, what does Ahab do? He goes back home to the little woman and he pouts some more.
Mhm.
And here's what it says in the last verse of 1 Kings 20. It says, so the king of Israel, now wrap your mind around that. He is the king of Israel, went to his house sullen and displeased and came to Samaria. So he's pouting once again. It didn't go his way. But Pam, I don't understand. If I were God, I would just want to be done with this man and say, forget it. I've given you chance after chance. You're still messing up. So why? Why would God continue to work with King Ahab? I mean, the scripture tells us that he's done more to make God mad than any other king before him. Well, I don't know. You got to help me with this one.
Well, God was even angrier at King Ben-Hadad of Syria.
Hmm.
He had gathered 32 other kings to join him in attacking Samaria. Now,
Oh,
Samaria was between Israel and Judah. And as bad as Ahab was, this guy was worse. Ahab was the king of Israel, so God used him to get rid of Ben-Hadad. But Ahab blew it again because he didn't follow God's directions. God scolded, so Ahab pouted.
yeah, poor little Ahab. Things
The
just don't go his way.
Bubby,
He
yes.
wants to do what he wants to do. And so now he's back home. He's pouting. He's unhappy. I just find it kind of curious that she made a vow and 24 hours went by, and then another 24 hours,
A lot more than
then
that. Yeah.
another 24 hours, then another 24 hours. And it says in there that she said, "May the gods do to me as," how did that go? As
As you
you've
did to
done to
them.
my,
Yeah.
yeah. But when you're talking about a God, it's not a God that has no power.
Hmm.
Is there really any danger in that? It would be like me saying, if I don't stay on my diet, may that coffee cup, bonk me in the head. Like, that's not gonna happen, unless somebody picks up the coffee cup and throws it at me, which they probably should. But
Mm.
she didn't. Uh, uh, she's just a piece of work. So the king is home. He's unhappy. He knows he's going to be punished because God keeps his promises.
Mhm.
But I don't know that that's going to stop his evil ways.
No, not yet.
Not yet. So next time when we get together, we're going to talk about what happens next in this story and how little wifey takes care of his problems, but God takes care of her.
Hmm.
And that's not a story for the
Faint of heart.
squeamish or faint of heart. Yes, it's
Mhm.
true. But we hope that you'll come back and you'll join us for that. Now we're about to go into the what can we learn, because you know me, I always want to apply it to our lives because that's what the Bible's all about. It's a history book, but we can always learn something from it. But I just think, so let me walk through this, Pam. After all the Baal gods were killed, the people were able to go back and worship God again. Is that kind of our understanding?
Baal prophets were killed. Baal wasn't alive to begin with. The
That's true.
prophets were killed. That's
His
true.
prophets were killed.
Hmm.
And so a prophet, explain what a prophet is. How can you be a prophet to something that's not real?
Well, it takes a lot of imagination and maybe a lot of pretending. I don't know, but they were, they might have functioned as priests as much as anything else for him, but supposedly they would speak for him. But evidently, if they thought that he had spoken to them, they were mistaken because he wasn't speaking that day.
No.
Um, the people did, once they saw what happened that day, they did hit the ground and say, "We know who the Lord is. We know it's God." And they were there. They totally threw out Baal.
Which is what they needed to do all along. But, again, they were forced at the beginning.
Hmm.
Sometimes I think about, I don't know. Recently I was looking at some pictures of the way things were back in the day. And somebody made a comment, I think it was on social media somewhere, that taking a hot shower is what, about 60 years old, something like that. That a shower, bathtubs have been around for a while. Been able to go into a walk-in shower or whatever. I think they said it came in about the 60s. And so we tend to think that things have always been the way they are.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
we laugh at the young people trying to figure out how to use a rotary phone, and
that,
now they're not teaching cursive, so all those old people have our own little secret code. We can write to each other in cursive. Um, and but these people worshiped God for a long time, and then they were forced to not worship God. And so now they get to go back to worshiping the true God. And I just think that we need to remember that it changed for them on a dime,
hmm
or at least it feels like that. And we take our religious freedom for granted. We think we've been doing this is how the country was established, and we're able to worship. I don't worry that somebody's gonna, it's in the back of your mind because there are crazy people in the world, but it's not against the law. The government at this point is not going to come in and arrest us for worshiping in a building.
right.
Um, and so it just makes me think about the predicament that these people were in. And then you have people like Obadiah, who was willing to hide all of these prophets, and the prophets that were of the true God. And then the prophets were um, willing to hide. Of course, they were afraid for their life, but still. And so I just think, that's a thought that I've been thinking about while we were talking today, is that, and I'm going to get to that here in just a minute, but we shouldn't take our religious freedom for granted.
Mm-mm.
We just really shouldn't. We should be thankful for it, and be active about trying to keep it. So, all right, enough on that. Did you have anything you wanted to say?
Well, you're touching on a subject that matters to me because we still have places where people aren't allowed to worship God
True.
or not allowed to worship in truth. Um, we have places where a person can lose their children, their home, their life, their freedom, or their lives because they won't give up believing in God and worshiping and teaching Him. So it's not a back in history thing. It's now in a lot of the world now.
True.
We have it easy in our country right now, but that could change at any time. Russia at the beginning of the 1900s was a very religious country, and
Mm.
they never would have guessed that that would be illegal within a couple of decades.
Yeah.
Um, it doesn't take as much as we think it does to do that. So we need to be protecting our faith, our right to worship God, and our decisions to worship Him no matter what the consequence.
Yeah. I agree. And I think about all the different characters in this story. The Ahab, the Jezebel, Obadiah, Elijah, the prophets, the false prophets, and all of us are going to fit into one of those categories, and we
Mhm.
we do now. But when our faith is tested and we're pressured, then we're really going to know who we are.
Right.
And I want to be Elijah or Obadiah in the story. I want to be someone that is, I'm probably going to be more Obadiah, because I'm probably going to be more like, okay, I'll do it, but I'm scared.
And that's okay. That's a natural thing. That's all right. That it's, he made his
Hmm.
commitment, he stuck to it.
All right, so let's go on with what can we learn. The first thing that I saw is that women can be evil too. Even though statistically men commit the majority of the really violent crimes or bloody crimes, women can be cruel and sadistic. And personally, I don't understand worshiping a God who wants to be served by human sacrifices. Uh, and I've also known of people that endured, my best friend for she's gone now, but for years suffered at the hands of people who claimed that sexually abusing her was a part of their religion,
Mhm.
and women were involved in that as well. And so, we have to remember that women can be evil too, and that women can have great power. I mean, Jezebel lived in a time where a lot of women didn't have a lot of power. But as the queen and as a princess, she had power. And unfortunately, she used that power for evil. And that's very eye-opening for me, is that all of us have power around us. We have influence on other people, and we have control over certain circumstances. And we have to choose whether we're going to use that power for good or for evil. And then the last thing that I noticed was that rulers can be evil, but everyone bows to God. Everyone is accountable to God. Scripture says that when Jesus returns, every knee shall bow and every tongue will confess. And so we need to remember that no matter who you are in this life and how much power on this earth you have, that just means you're responsible for more. It doesn't
Mm.
mean that you have power to do what you want. It just means that come judgment day, your list of things that you're accountable for is going to be longer than the people that didn't have influence and power over other people. And there are people that are willing to put their lives in danger. There are people that are willing to be inconvenienced. Um, but all of these people had to alter their lives to follow God. And like I said a minute ago, we may be called to do the same thing.
You know, eh, I'm thinking about how people can look ahead to that and think, "What I wonder what I would do if it was against the law to talk about God, would I be able to stand up?" And a lot of them are people who don't stand up now and
Yeah.
talk about God. Think how many of folks have will say, "Well, I can't just talk to people about God just because they might not like it. They might get mad at me. They might judge me. They might call me judgmental. They might this and this and this, all these mights that they might do. So I can't really just start talking to people about these things." And if you won't do it now in a country where it's legal and all you got to worry about is someone maybe not agreeing, then you're not going to be able to stand up for God and worship Him like you should when it becomes illegal to, when it becomes a risk to your life or your home to do that. But we have to. Obadiah was working in the house of the people that were making these laws
Hmm.
and still standing up and doing what he should. And the people of Israel had just become, well, we have to do it this way. Jezebel says, and we'll die if we don't. So we have to just get used to it and settle down and enjoy. If you're not willing right now to speak up for God,
Hmm.
you're going to just do that. You're going to just say, well, nothing else I can do about it. I have to do what they tell me to. And your faith is nothing and it won't save you.
And that's scary. I've heard that the church grows the most under oppression, because
Hmm.
at that point you don't, you know, Jesus says, if you're lukewarm, I'm going to spit you out of my mouth. There is no fence sitting, but
Mm-mm.
it's easy to be tempted to fence sit under comfortable circumstances. But there may come a day where our country is ruled by an Ahab and a Jezebel.
Right.
And when that happens, we may find ourselves in the predicament that Obadiah and Elijah were in. And I
Mm.
just pray that, and I believe that there will be those that will stand up. I believe that there will be
They
those that
will.
will.
But
And I
there'll be a
think that's a
sifting.
true test of faith.
There'll be a
When
sifting situation where people, real faith and mild and milk toast faith will disappear, and people will compromise their beliefs in order to cope with their fears.
Mm.
And we don't realize that we're going to be one of those until we face it. But like I said, if you can't speak to someone in a waiting room at a doctor's office who you struck up a conversation with and something gives you an opportunity to talk to them about God, if you can't talk to that person about your faith, or a neighbor, or any other situation, if you can't use opportunities now to talk to someone about the Bible, about God, and about salvation, you're not going to make it through that when the real hard times come and the challenges come.
That's scary to think about. That's something for us all to think about because we all know some Jezebels and we all know some Ahabs.
And they
And
take power.
it's it's up to us to make a decision who we're going to be. Personally, I don't want to be a Jezebel.
I think that's a good decision. I'm proud of you.
All right, ladies. Now, the next time we get together, we're going to see exactly what little Jezzy, as Pam likes to call her, does for hubby because he's come home to pout. Now, the story is not over, so you want to come back. Please join us.